Welcome to the Planet Purl tutorial, Binding Off in Rib. Supplies for today's lesson, yarn, and straight needles. Now I've already knitted up a section here of ribbing so that I can show you how to bind off in rib. And you can see from this swatch, the first stitch would be a knit stitch. So to bind off in rib, we knit the knit stitch, and then the second stitch, which will be the one to start the bind off, we're going to purl since this is 1 by 1 rib. And you use the same technique if you're binding off in pattern. Then use the tip of your needle to pull the first stitch, the one that was knitted, off over the top of the stitch you purled. Now the next stitch would normally, in a 1 by 1 rib, be a knit stitch, so we will knit the stitch. Then we will use the tip of the needle to grab the stitch we had purled and pull it over the knit stitch. Then back between the needles and purl the next stitch, which would have been a purl in the rib. Pick up the stitch behind it, pull it over, and drop it off the needle, as you would in a regular bind off. Back between the needles, knit the stitch, pick up, and drop the stitch. Back between the needles, purl the stitch, pick up, and drop off the stitch before. And we're going to continue this way, going back between the needles and continuing to work the rib, and then just picking up and dropping the previous stitch. So you're working the pattern just as if you weren't going to bind off, and then adding the bind off technique on every other stitch. And this is what it looks like when you bind off in rib. Now here's a piece that I did bind off the neck in rib, and you can see how it stays nice and stretchy and how the pattern runs all the way to the edge. This is a nice technique when you're binding off a turtleneck or the bottom of a sleeve if you're working from the top down. Woo! Martha likes it. Looks good, huh, Martha? Visit us at planetpurl.com.